The restaurant hummed softly under golden chandeliers, the kind of place where laughter was muted and everything smelled faintly of money. Emily moved between tables with practiced grace, balancing trays and smiles though her feet ached beneath her worn shoes. She'd been on her shift since afternoon, but exhaustion had become such a constant companion that she barely noticed it anymore. Tonight felt like every other night, until she saw him. He sat alone in the corner booth, near the window. A man in his mid-40s, wearing a navy suit that probably cost more than she made in a month. His silver watch caught the light each time he moved, but it wasn't his wealth that drew her attention, it was the emptiness in his expression. He stared at his untouched wine as though searching for something inside it. His posture was composed, but his eyes carried the quiet heaviness of a man who'd seen too much and said too little. Emily approached with her small notepad, forcing her best service smile. "Good evening, sir. Would you like to start with something to drink?" He looked up, startled from his thoughts. His gaze met hers, and for a brief moment, she felt the air shift. "I suppose, yes," he said softly, his voice smooth but tired. "Red wine, your best one." "Of course," she said, jotting it down. "Would you like to hear tonight's specials?" He nodded but didn't seem to care. While she listed the menu items, his eyes never really left her face, not in a predatory way, but as though trying to remember something. When she walked away, she could still feel his eyes on her, curious and searching. Later, as she returned with his order, she noticed he hadn't touched the bread basket or even sipped his drink. "Is everything all right, sir?" she asked gently. He smiled faintly. "You remind me of someone," he said. Emily tilted her head, surprised. "I do," he nodded. "Someone who used to smile like that even when the world gave her nothing to smile about." She didn't know what to say. "That's kind of sad, actually." He gave a quiet laugh, but it carried no joy. "Maybe it is." He paused, then looked directly at her. "Tell me, do you ever wish you could leave everything behind? Just walk out and see the world?" The question was so sudden that Emily blinked. "Every day," she admitted with a small laugh. "But bills don't pay themselves, so here I am." "Practical," he murmured. "I used to think that way too." When she came back with his main course, the restaurant had grown quieter. He pushed his plate away, barely eating. "What's your name?" he asked. "Emily," she said, a little uncertain. "Emily." He repeated it like a word he hadn't spoken in years. Then he took a deep breath, as if gathering courage. "Emily, I know this may sound strange, but I have something to tell you." She waited, her curiosity piqued. "I've been diagnosed with a terminal illness," he said flatly, as though rehearsed. "My doctors gave me 1 month. Maybe less." Her breath caught. I'm so sorry." He waved off her sympathy. "Don't be. I've had more than most people get in 10 lifetimes. But money doesn't buy more time." He leaned forward, eyes locked on hers. "So I've decided I don't want to spend the rest of my days waiting to die. I want to live, see the world, feel something real before it's gone." Emily swallowed hard, unsure if she should walk away or stay. "That's understandable." He studied her face, calm but intent. "Then come with me." "What?" she whispered, thinking she'd misheard. "Travel with me," he said, his tone steady now. "I'll handle everything. Expenses, tickets, whatever you need. Just say yes." The clinking of glasses and low chatter of the restaurant faded until all she could hear was the sound of her own heartbeat. This was insane. She didn't even know his name. "Why me?" she finally asked. He smiled, faint but sincere. "Because when everyone else treats me like a dying man, you look at me like I'm still alive." Emily stared at him, words caught in her throat. For the first time in years, she didn't know whether to laugh, cry, or run. And somewhere deep inside her chest, a whisper she'd long ignored began to stir. What if you said yes? Emily had never been on a private jet before. The floor shimmered like marble, the seats looked softer than her bed at home, and every detail, from the soft lighting to the faint vanilla scent in the air, spoke of wealth she couldn't even imagine. Yet, as she sat across from David, the millionaire who'd invited her on this unbelievable journey, she felt anything but comfortable. Her heart thudded as the engines roared to life. "Still time to back out," David said quietly, watching her fidget with the strap of her seatbelt. His voice carried a strange calmness. Like he had already accepted that life was temporary, but she was still learning to breathe in his world. "I've already quit my job," Emily said, trying to sound braver than she felt. "Might as well see what I gave it up for." He smiled faintly. "You won't regret it." When the jet lifted off the runway, Emily's stomach turned, both from the altitude and from the realization that she had just left everything she knew behind. The city lights of New York grew smaller until they looked like scattered stars beneath them. Their first stop was Paris. The moment she stepped off the jet, the air felt different, cooler, perfumed with coffee, croissants, and the faint hum of languages she didn't understand. David had arranged for a sleek black car to pick them up, and by sunset, they were standing on the balcony of a five-star hotel overlooking the Eiffel Tower, its lights glittering against the evening sky. Emily leaned against the railing, her heart swelling with disbelief. "I've only seen this in movies," she whispered. David stood beside her, hands in his pockets. "Then let's make it your movie." Over the next few days, their journey unfolded like a dream. They wandered through the narrow streets of Montmartre, where artists painted in the open air, and sat in quiet cafes sipping cappuccinos that cost more than her daily wages back home. Emily marveled at the way David carried himself, graceful, polite, but always slightly detached, as if he were looking at everything for the last time. She noticed how he paused before every painting in the Louvre, his eyes glimmering not with admiration but nostalgia. "I used to come here with my mother," he said once, voice barely above a whisper. "She said beauty makes life worth enduring." I didn't understand her then. Emily looked at him, the golden light of the museum reflecting in his eyes. "And now, he said, his lips curving faintly, "I finally do." They dined under the stars at a rooftop restaurant, the Eiffel Tower sparkling in the distance. Emily laughed more than she had in months, even teasing him when he tried escargot for her sake and nearly choked. But beneath the laughter, she caught fleeting shadows, moments when he pressed a hand to his chest, his expression tightening before he brushed it off. One night, after a long walk along the Seine, they stopped at a bridge. The water shimmered with the reflection of city lights, and the world seemed to hush around them. "Why me?" she asked softly, unable to hold back any longer. "You could have asked anyone, an old friend, a companion, someone who knows you." David looked at her, the wind tousling his hair. "Because you have no reason to pretend," he said. "You see life the way I've forgotten to. Every small thing fascinates you, the taste of food, the sound of laughter, even the rain. I wanted to remember that feeling." Emily's chest tightened. "And what happens after the month ends?" He smiled gently. "Then the story ends, and you go back to living yours." She looked away, her throat tightening. "That's not fair." "No," he agreed, his gaze soft. "But life rarely is." They stood in silence, the city glowing around them, two souls from different worlds bound by borrowed time. Emily didn't know what she was searching for in his eyes, maybe truth, maybe hope, but what she found was something deeper, the terrifying beauty of impermanence. As they walked back to the car, rain began to fall, light and soft. David stopped in the middle of the street, laughing quietly. "You know, I've never danced in the rain." Emily smiled. "Then let's fix that." And right there, in the heart of Paris, the Millionaire and the Waitress twirled beneath the streetlights, soaked and breathless, as if they could outdance time itself. The sun melted over the Venetian canals like liquid gold, turning the water into ribbons of light. Emily leaned over the balcony of their suite, her hair fluttering in the soft wind, watching gondolas drift beneath her. It had been 3 weeks since she'd said yes to David, and every day since had felt like a dream she wasn't ready to wake from. Paris, Rome, Santorini, each city etched new memories into her heart. Yet tonight, something in David's silence unsettled her. He sat inside, staring at a photo in his hands. She recognized it. It was an old picture of him, younger, smiling with a woman beside him. Her eyes sparkled with the kind of love that left marks on a person's soul. Emily hesitated before walking in. "She's beautiful," she said softly. David's head lifted, his expression unreadable. "She was," he murmured. "Her name was Claire. We were engaged once." Emily stepped closer. "What happened?" He sighed, setting the photo down. I was building an empire. Working late, chasing deals, proving myself. I thought success would make me happy. But I missed dinners, anniversaries, everything that mattered. She left one morning and didn't look back. 2 years later, I read in the paper she'd married someone else. His voice trembled slightly, and Emily felt a pang in her chest. You loved her. I did, he said. But not enough to stop being the man I thought I had to be. Emily sat beside him, the silence between them thick with unspoken things. She wanted to comfort him but didn't know how. Instead, she reached out and touched his hand lightly. Maybe that's why you're doing this trip, to find what you lost back then. He looked at her, eyes softening. Maybe, or maybe I'm trying to make peace with the man I became. They spent the evening wandering through narrow streets, lanterns glowing above them like tiny stars. The air smelled of sea salt and baked bread. At a small cafe by the water, David ordered wine and insisted on teaching her how to taste it properly. Swirl it first, he said, demonstrating with an exaggerated flourish. Let it breathe. Emily giggled. It's just wine, David. He smiled, the first genuine one she'd seen all day. It's never just wine. Life is in the small details. You miss them when you're too busy chasing something bigger. She swirled the glass, mimicking him. Like this trip, he laughed softly. Exactly. When the waiter brought dessert, David pushed his plate toward her. You try. I shouldn't have too much sugar. Emily frowned. Because of your health. He nodded. Some days I feel fine. Others. He trailed off, staring at his trembling hands. The medicine only does so much. She reached across the table, covering his hand with hers. Then we make the good days count. His gaze lifted to hers. There was something in it, an unspoken gratitude. You make it easier to forget, he said quietly. They walked back to the hotel under the moonlight, their hands brushing occasionally but never fully holding. Every touch felt like a question, every glance like an answer they weren't ready to speak aloud. Later that night, Emily couldn't sleep. She stepped onto the balcony again, watching the reflections dance on the water below. She thought about how fast everything had changed. The waitress who once counted tips to survive now standing in Venice beside a dying millionaire. And somewhere in the blur of it all, she realized she wasn't doing this for the money anymore. She cared, deeply. Behind her, David's voice broke the stillness. You should rest. Tomorrow we leave for the Maldives. She turned, smiling faintly. You never stop moving, do you? He shrugged. If I stop, I might have to face what's coming. Emily walked to him, placing a gentle hand on his chest, feeling the faint, uneven rhythm of his heart. Then don't face it alone, she whispered. He looked at her for a long moment, then pulled her into a quiet embrace. For the first time since they'd met, there were no walls between them, just two souls holding on to a moment that both knew couldn't last forever. And as the gondolas glided through the moonlit canals below, Emily understood the truth she'd been avoiding all along. She was falling in love with a man who was running out of time. The sky above the lake burned with shades of pink and amber as the sun began its slow descent. The air was crisp, carrying the scent of pine and earth, and the only sound was the soft ripple of water against the wooden dock. David sat wrapped in a wool blanket, his once strong frame now frail, the vibrancy that had carried them through Europe fading with each passing day. Emily knelt beside him, tucking the blanket closer around his shoulders. Too cold? She asked softly. He smiled faintly. Not compared to the Alps, he murmured. Remember how you complained about the snow? Emily laughed through the ache in her throat. I wasn't complaining. My toes just stopped existing. Ah, right, he chuckled weakly. You said you wanted to travel, not freeze to death. His humor, though faint, filled her with warmth. But beneath her smile, her heart trembled. The doctors had been right. Time was running out. Every morning, David's voice grew softer, his steps slower. And yet, he insisted on one last destination. The lake house where he'd grown up, far from cities and crowds, just silence and memory. Inside the cabin, the fire crackled softly. The walls were lined with photos. David as a boy fishing with his father, running through meadows with his sister, his first company ribbon framed by the window. Emily looked around and felt a sudden intimacy, as if she'd been invited into the final chapter of his life. Your sister's coming tomorrow, she said, setting a cup of tea on the table. David nodded, his eyes distant. We haven't spoken in 15 years. She wants to see you, Emily said gently. He looked at her, the corners of his mouth twitching into something between regret and relief. You did that, didn't you? You reached out to her. She hesitated, then nodded. You needed to. David's gaze softened. You're braver than you think, Emily. You do what I never did, face things. She sat beside him, resting her hand on his. His skin was cool, fragile, like paper. You taught me how to live, she whispered. Before you, my world ended at the restaurant door. He smiled faintly. You taught me how to feel again. The room fell quiet except for the crackling fire. Outside, the last light of the sun kissed the lake, turning it into molten gold. Emily could see their reflection in the glass, two souls from different worlds, bound by borrowed time. After dinner, David asked to sit by the water again. Emily helped him to the dock, wrapping his blanket tighter around him. The stars were beginning to appear, scattered diamonds in a velvet sky. I've made some arrangements, he said suddenly. Emily frowned. What kind? He handed her a folded envelope. There's a letter inside, and papers. I've set up a foundation in your name, to fund travel scholarships for people who can't afford to see the world. It's what you told me once, that everyone deserves at least one beautiful memory. Her eyes filled instantly. David, I can't. You already did, he interrupted gently. You gave me mine. Tears slipped down her cheeks as she gripped his hand. Don't talk like that. We still have time. He smiled weakly. Time is just a word now. The night deepened, and David's breathing grew shallow. Emily held him close, her tears soaking his shoulder. Stay with me, she whispered, her voice breaking. His fingers brushed her cheek, trembling. I am, he said. Always. And with that, he exhaled one final breath, soft, almost peaceful, as the lake shimmered under the moonlight. Emily stayed there, holding him, her heart cracking open under the weight of both love and loss. By morning, the world was silent. She buried him beneath a birch tree overlooking the water, the same view he'd loved since childhood. A week later, she returned to the city, not to the restaurant, but to a small cafe she opened in his memory. The walls were filled with photos of their journey, Paris, Venice, Santorini, the lake, and above the counter hung a sign that read, "For those chasing one last dream." And every time she served coffee to a stranger with tired eyes, she remembered the man who taught her that life's greatest luxury wasn't wealth, it was time, shared with someone who truly sees you.